British Council is, but we have about 12, maybe 10,000 people around the world building connections, understanding, and trust between the people of the UK and people all around the world. So it's a big, complex, unwieldy organization, and a very interesting one to be the CEO of. And before that, I was the leader of one of the big management consulting firms, Oliver Wyman, for about 10 years.
Thank you, Scott. And over to you, Adam. Can you tell me a bit about your organization, and especially in the area of education?
So I'm currently the director of SOAS, University of London, which is a humanities and social science university that's dedicated to understanding and serving as a bridge to institutions and peoples of Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. I often say that it's a university committed to understanding the planetary questions of our time, but from the perspective of the majoritarian world, the peoples of Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Prior to that, I was Vice Chancellor and CEO, obviously, of the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa, which was a comprehensive institution of about 40,000. And it was dedicated and seen to be one of the research-intensive universities on the African continent. I've spent most of my life in higher education, and at least the last 12 years in a CEO in either South African universities or a UK university.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And last, Yin, can you tell me about exciting technology company that you are now leading on?
Sure. Hi everyone. Thanks, Vanang. Hi everyone. So I'm currently the CEO at B Group, a local Vietnamese homegrown ride-hailing super apps, a direct competitor of Grab, which I hope that many of you heard about in this part of the world. So I have been in a tech platform or tech industry for the last 10 plus years. I've been twice a CEO of a tech company, ranging between 300 to 600 people. So obviously I'm very passionate about running tech platforms, particularly B2C, for the simple reason is I believe that platform to the scale of a few millions users have a lot of influence and potential to impact people's behavior. For example, right, just 2 weeks ago, we signed a deal with an EV maker, electric vehicle, right? So we hope that we could convert more people to use, green and electric vehicles on the roads, somewhat to impact the behavior. So that's one of the things that I believe in. So yeah, all for tech and all for super apps.
Yes, I heard about exciting news with the new deal on the green. So we will explore more. So I'm quite curious, and I'm sure that our audience as well to know about the life of the CEO. So maybe let me start with a very quick question. Like I have 3 questions for each of you, and I expect that you can answer only in 1 sentence. So this is the very first challenge for you. So let me go with Scott first. Scott, can you tell us a title of your recent reading, either book or article, please?
The CEOs are never good at speaking in short sentences, but I'm trying to get through a 1,000-page biography of Peter the Great by Robert Massey to give me the earliest reading of the relationship between Russia and Ukraine that I could come across.
Very contemporary issue. And next, the top country in your travel bucket list that you want to go.
So I have a long list, but I'm desperate to get to the 2 poles. So I would love to go to the Antarctic, to go to the research center and try and relive some of Shackleton's adventures.
So we hope to hear when you go there. Do share on your LinkedIn and Twitter so we can enjoy the moment there. Okay, so the third one, what makes you awake at night?
So we'll get into this later, I'm sure. There are lots of things that occasionally wake me up at night, even though I'm a pretty good sleeper. But I have an 18-year-old daughter, and it is essentially her adventures and sort of travails through life that keeps me up most.
Yes, I share the same because I also a 15 years old daughter. So next, Adam. So what is your leisure activity?
Actually, I go running. I run and I do yoga. Since I've come to London, I do hot yoga, partly because I miss the heat in South Africa. And the great thing about hot yoga is I get heat, plus I do some exercise.
Oh, all right. Yeah, interesting. So if you could deliver a speech, and who could be your favorite audience?
My favorite audience is probably students, young people who have the ability to change the world. If I can have a receptive audience of young people and convince them of something, I think that there is no greater agent of change in our world.
Yes, young people is the future of the world, and that led me to the third question. Who is your favorite newcomer in higher education sector that it has made it big?
Well, that's a hard question to ask. I think that in higher education, I think the thing that a group of people that really excite me are the new PhD students that are just graduating, because they're graduating in a particular world, in a particular context, and they taking the disciplinary knowledge they have and applying it in a very complex world. And so that's the group that I would talk about rather than an individual.
Yes. Still, yeah, it's all about education. It's all about people. And thank you, Adam, for sharing that insight. And Ian, now, of course, my very first question relating to what you are doing now. So, what are your 3 favorite apps on your smartphone?
Oh, good question, actually. So my most favorite is actually Waking Up, which is a meditation app that I think is really good, curated by Sam Harris. And it's amazing. Like it helps me a lot, basically. The second one is Garmin Connect, which is connected to my smartphones. A smartwatch. It measures body battery every day, so I need that. The last one is obviously Bee. I use it every day.
That's good, because again, what I thought that B would be your first one. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to learn about you. So now come to from work to the study. What was your favorite subject at LSE?
Oh, so I study economics, accounting, and all these, typical Asian subjects. But I think one of the things was very interesting was the operational research, which is also the course is called management science. So I think it was very interesting because it kind of teach you how, for example, if London is going to host an Olympic, how would you plan the whole project? Like all the stadiums, all the venues, all the places, how does it all happen together, and the budgeting. So I thought that was very cool.
Yeah, thank you. And the last one for you is, who would you want people to know before you become the CEO?
What do you mean? Like who?
Okay, who like if you would not become a CEO, who would you like to be?
Oh, I don't think of myself as a CEO. I think of myself as a leader. And I don't think I want to be anything else. Like I'm not good at being an artist or a doctor. So I think this is my only choice. Kind of.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So that's interesting about like what you are thinking.
Yeah.
I think that the connection was disrupted. Okay, we're back now. So that take me to another question that we really want to learn. What is the ordinary day of a CEO? So can Scott, you share with us on what is your ordinary day?
Yeah, so I'm happy to start, although hearing Yen answer those questions made me think that maybe all leaders are more alike than I thought. I was going to say we're all different, but I also track my body battery every day on Garmin. I also really like operations research. I find it quite fascinating, and I'm going to get the waking up app, but that's a slightly different question. So typical day for me is that there is no typical day. And it's one of the fun things I think about being a leader is that, some days I'm traveling, some days I'm meeting partners, some days I'm getting beaten up by the government. Some days I'm at, one of our schools or one of our exam centers. And sometimes I have to do internal stuff around people or finance or other things like that. But, I really don't have regular hours. I don't have regular places I am. I don't have regular people that I see, except a few maybe management teams that I see on a regular basis. So every day is completely different.
I think we might have lost Pradesh.
Yeah. Okay. So we seem that we lost your connection. So can you hear us again?
Oh yes, I can hear you fine. I think it might be your connection.
All right. Okay, it's my connection. Sorry. So Adam, how about a life of director of SOAS?
So I think in one sense, Scott is right, that days are very, very different, but there is a pattern that tends to emerge. So my peculiarity is I wake up in the morning and the first thing I have is not the wake up app yet. I go for a coffee. I do need 2 cups of coffee to wake up. If I don't have my dose of caffeine, I can't seem to operate. And then I kick off with calls and emails as a general rule. Even if I'm traveling, that's the kind of first thing that I would do at any. And then it's a series of meetings. I wish I had fewer meetings in a day. I have too many meetings in a day. Sometimes, as Scott says, with partners, sometimes with statutory structures or management structures, sometimes with part of the executive team that I work with. And all of it, and sometimes with donors and funders and partners. But all of those conversations are about challenges that we have around delivering on one or other agenda, the kind of options that we have to try and overcome those difficulties and making trade-offs. And that's the collective. It seems to me if there's anything that's in the life of a CEO or a leader is making difficult decisions, understanding trade-offs, and making decisions with the least cost and the greatest benefit for what you need to achieve.
Okay, so thank you, Adam, for sharing. Yes, it's quite challenging. It's a lot of stakeholders that we need to manage, and even sometimes you have to make a difficult decision as well. However, this is also what you think. Which a bit about your job that you find very rewarding.
Okay, I'm gonna dive in there because I think we may have lost our moderator. We may have to moderate ourselves. I think the question was what do I find rewarding about the job? And I'll make a few points, and maybe Jan and Adam, I'll pass right over to you. But one of the things I find rewarding is related to your point, Adam, about trade-offs, because I always think like the organizations I work in are full of terrific people who are very smart, who are good at making decisions. So if there's any question that has an answer or that has a relatively easy process to determine the answer, that's already been answered somewhere in the system by someone probably smarter than me. The only ones that come to me are ones that don't actually have an answer. And you've got to make a judgment and make some trade-off and try and come up with the best possible answer without all the data. And that's very intellectually stimulating and challenging to do, and one of the reasons I like the job. The other thing I like doing, which I find really inspiring, is trying to lay out a vision for an organization that feels almost impossible. And then going on the adventure of trying to make it happen with all the people you work with. And it's volatile, you have ups and downs, but it really does feel like an adventure and an exploration, and you learn. Those are the couple of the many things I find really interesting.
Yes. Yeah. How about you, Ian? Yep. Sorry, Adam.
I think part of being in tech is obviously the constant change, right? So obviously for me, I mean, I'm very quick to bore, so I'm very fast to get bored of things. Since I was small, and my dad hated it so much. So I think the best thing about working in a technology environment and at the top title in the leadership position is that it's constantly so difficult, and that's the most rewarding for me. First of all, and I think the second thing is it helps you to be, because of the constant change, right? Yesterday you were good, but today you need to have a different methods or formula, or even a different team, right, to handle the changes in technology and the market and the competition. So you push your limit a lot. And what I learned the best is not just how good you are in the job, in the expertise, the skills, and the technical stuff, but like how you really are as a person, like how kind you are, how persuasive you are, how influential you are, as much as you want it to be. And the CEO title gives you something to leverage on that, but the reality is people listen to leaders, real leaders, not just a title, right? So that part is, for me, as a younger generation leadership, right, for me is very rewarding, because I'm happy that I learned it, also the hard way as well, like so I learned it through a lot of failures as well. So that part is very rewarding for me.
Yeah, learning is also a constant change to help you develop as well. And how about you, Adam? Anything that you feel like?
There's two things I would say. One is related to what Yen just said. And I think that the technological revolution has fundamentally changed the possibilities for higher education. I think higher education is on the cusp of fundamental transformation. The way people are going to learn in 20, 30 years is going to be completely different to the way they learn now. And I think that the element that has changed, that is technology, the ability to do transnational education, the ability to learn in one classroom in Vietnam and another classroom in Johannesburg and a third classroom in London. And I think learning to navigate that, to introduce technology, to think through what that means and how the pedagogy is going to learn to be different, and to think through how people are going to learn differently, is one of the most interesting things that I've come across and is most rewarding. The second, related to that, is we live in a world that's very polarized. We live in a world that's economically fragile, and how to innovate around the technology while managing the politics and the economics is the real tricky thing, it seems to me, of most leaders in the contemporary world. And perhaps it's the most innovative, it's the most interesting, but it can be the most rewarding if you start to get it right.
Yes, you mentioned about the technology. Yes, it's really challenging, and also that it changed the way that we are doing things now. However, I think that there also should be a moment when you think that you want to become a leader. We are not talking about CEO, as Ian said that she doesn't see herself as CEO, but want to be a leader. So can you share your personal story or journey on when you think that you want to become someone who can bring people on and create this change and influence people? So maybe traditionally, let me move to our Scott.
Sure. I don't know whether this is normal for a CEO, but I think I'm an accidental leader, and I never actually, as a young person, set out to be a leader. I was generally happy with what I did. I worked hard. I enjoyed it. And when I was a partner at the consulting firm, we used to have elections. So we had 600 partners, and they elected the new leader of the firm. And we had elections one year, and I was actually just looking for a little more profile, and I thought it would be fun to enter the contest and give a few speeches about what I thought about the world and the way the company should be taken forward. And much to the shock of me and everyone else, I won, became a leader out of nowhere, and then I think I had to grow into it over time. So it's probably a bit of an unusual story.
Yes, something that we won't know before. So how about you, Ian?
So the question was like, what did I have in mind when I was younger, right?
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
Like I said, right, I never planned to be a CEO. I don't even think of that, the title as much. I think naturally it's also the personality as well, right? So I normally a very active, kind of taking control of the situation in a way. So I'm very kind of responsible as a kid. So I take care of things in the house and with friends and family events. So naturally, as long as you want to get things done, naturally you get into a place where you initiate things or take over things when other people may be relatively more passive because of a lot of reasons, right? So I think that's where it all started. For the last 2 CEO jobs, right, I want to do the job because the CEO role is likely the highest role with the most power in a company, except that you, of course, you have to report to the board and other stakeholders. But generally, that is the role that would relatively, in theory, enable you to do the most if you have something that you really want to get done. So that's the thinking, right? So I don't plan, but obviously I like tech a lot. I want to make things happen. I want to grow the platform. For example, right now B has 7 million users. I want to bring it into 20 million users. I want to make a lot of good things happen with the behavior and the consumer in Vietnam. So to do that, right, this is a platform. And to do that, obviously the CEO role is a platform. It's an enabler for me. So yeah, so that's the thinking.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, exactly. That sometimes we need an enabling environment for you to thrive. And Adam, I would like to raise that question because I also noticed that you start your new roles in early of 2021. So when the pandemic happened, but there's still a long way to go during the pandemic. So what make you wake up at night during that pandemic, and how you're dealing with your university when everything have closed and students cannot travel?
Yeah.
And
And it's an interesting question, and it's in part related to the earlier one. My own peculiar evolution to a leadership role emerged because for the first part of my life, I was an activist in South Africa against the apartheid state, part of a movement of millions of South Africans to overcome apartheid. And so I often describe myself as having dedicated the first part of my life to breaking institutions like the state, delegitimizing the state and its institutions. The second part of my life emerges when post-apartheid South Africa emerges under Nelson Mandela. And in that period, we're starting to build institutions. So I kind of evolved from breaking institutions to building institutions. And in that context, how to build, how to create inclusive institutions, how to create institutions that reach wider layers of people. And that's how I evolved into this kind of position. So in a sense, my kind of leadership is a natural evolution of my activism of earlier years, but in a different institutional role and in a different institutional context. And that's meant 2 things. It's meant a commitment on the one hand to really the goals, the social goals that I've committed, inclusion, creating an enabling environment for poor people to have the same opportunities, etc. But the same thing that I've learned, unlike in my earlier years, is to be pragmatic about it. How do you make that link up with financial sustainability? How do you get the balance right between financial sustainability and social income goals? And so when you ask a question like that, what worries me in the middle of the pandemic was how to continue to deliver. How do we, everybody got taken by surprise. How do you use this opportunity not to close down the university, but to continue to deliver to students whose learning must not be impaired? How do we suddenly take technology that we had been experimenting with in little classrooms and said, how do we go mainstream with the technology? And it wasn't really online learning at that stage. It was, if you like, what I would describe emergency remote learning, taking a camera, putting it on you and teaching on scale. And it seemed to me that that's what we had to do. And that's what keeps me awake. That's what kept me awake during that pandemic, is how to take the technology and deliver it for the social goal that we were committed to doing.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. mentioned a lot about the technology, how we impact on life, and that led me to ask another question to three of you: is that the world has changed significantly post-pandemic. There's pressing issues like green agenda for organization, technology disruption, the rise of AI. We talk a lot about ChatGPT now, and that elevated more than ever before. So how you are addressing these challenges within your organizational context? So maybe firstly, I would like to invite Scott.
Sure. I think one of the interesting, another coming back to your earlier question, the interesting part about being the CEO is you know everything happening across the institution, or you should know most of it if you're good. And that also means you know all the vulnerabilities you have. You know where you're financially weak. You know where some of your senior people might be thinking about going somewhere else. You know where your technology needs to be improved and built on over time. And sort of related to what Adam was saying, but I see two different roles in the organization. They're kind of agitators that are necessary for any organization who highlight flaws, they criticize, they hold people accountable, and they need to be encouraged in every organization to be there and speak up and speak out. But then there's often the senior team and hopefully a broader team who's got to take all that information and build from there. And you have to create something, and you have to make trade-offs and take practical decisions to try and move ahead. And so I think, coming back to your question on technology, I think we have tons of vulnerabilities on the technology side. Everything is moving very quickly. And the areas we operate, whether that's cultural exchange or whether it's university partnerships or whether it's exams or whether it's teaching, every one of them is going to be profoundly changed for the next 20 years. And we have to make sure we don't get left behind, and whole pieces of what we do don't just disappear because they're not relevant anymore. And so that, it's a constant bit of work to be done, having people think about what the technology is, think about what the ways of working will be, to experiment and then move ahead.
Yes, it's quite unpredictable, and there's a lot of things that even you need to experiment. So how about Ian? What is the impact to your technology of your company, who is the technology-based company?
Yeah, I think the difference for us is obviously we are a technology company. So it's in our nature, in our business model and daily operation, that we already in the middle of the technology movements. And the thing is, even if you're in the Vietnam market, right, you're actually competing with global players. So unless you understand about the global player, the global movements and playground, you wouldn't be able to compete with the like of, Gojek and Grab and, Lazada and coming Amazon as well. So for us, it's a constant battle, but I think a few key things, right? I think it's still everything to do with people. So training and hirings is extremely important, and it's a lot. Sometimes it's a lot to do with the ability to be very brave about replacing or upgrading people, and it's normally a very hard topic to touch, to do with firing and changing the very contribution of different function within your company to ensure that we future-proof, put it that way. The third thing is sometimes we try to do a lot of experiments, looks a bit further in the future. For example, the EV thing, right? It's actually a very early thing for Vietnam market, but unless we get into that, right, then we can be more understanding of this whole technology coming up and this whole, auto driverless kind of cars coming as well. So I guess spending a portion of your effort and budget and, people on that is very important for us as well, even though we're in the middle of the whole technology advancement kind of as a technology company.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And Adam, do you have anything to add into the conversation?
I think that what is interesting about the technology, I said earlier on, I think we're in the cusp of a major revolution in higher education, and I think technology is going to enable that. So how do you harness technology to teach on a transcontinental platform? But as you do that, we've got to understand that how we actually address the global challenges of our time is going to be different in Vietnam to how you do it in Johannesburg. Is maybe the technologies are the same, but how they apply, how they emerge in that context, how they adopted will differ. So you need local knowledge and global technology and science. And bringing the two together is what I think is the really interesting thing about higher education. So it's not about British universities thinking they're going to teach people in Vietnam or in India or in South Africa or in Buenos Aires, but it's them working with institutions in those societies to bring local knowledge and global knowledge in conversation with each other. And I think that's the future. And I think that's what we've got to kind of think about, how we harness technology, but how do we deploy it carefully in a way that we build the human capabilities around the world to address the transnational challenges of our time. We've got climate change, pandemics, inequality, all these are global challenges. If we do not fix them around the world, all of us will suffer. So I think that's the really interesting thing about higher education and about using and harnessing technology collectively for the human enterprise.
Thank you, Adam. Excellent, because you just led me to ask another question relating to the gender equalities and also in the technology context. So this question, firstly, for Yin. The ride-hailing business in Vietnam is very competitive, and as you said, that B is now competing with a global company. But I also know that the majority of your employers are men. So what is your biggest challenge as a female CEO in the technology company with male dominant staff?
It might be strange, but again, I'm actually, I never thought of myself as a female CEO. I just think of myself as a leader. And I think I faced the kind of problem, maybe other people would see that, right? But I'm normally also the youngest person in the room normally. Maybe next 10 years I would be, because now the kids are very young. I have people born in 2005 in my office. It's crazy. It's like, this is a different kind of thing. So come back to the question, right? I think this is my personal view, right? I think life is not fair. So like I have a lot of Asian friends in the US, right, who are very successful, and they say that yes, they have to work 5 times, 10 times harder to make it in a typical white male setup, and that's okay, because it's the work that counts. No one gonna care that if you complain that because you're a woman, so it's more difficult for you, right? So I actually don't think of that, and I think it's being a woman doesn't mean it's a worse position, right? Women have a lot of skills that relatively or generally is more flexible, more smooth when it comes to some part of the scope, right? And the same for men. There's pros and cons. So yeah, I don't see it as a problem. I just think that we all need to work really hard to do whatever we want to do.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. But it's also about like how you will enable and champion the female leadership to ensure that people are given equal chance to be success like you. So anything you add in on how you implement that at your company?
I agree that it's important to do more enabling, but I think it starts with the mindset, because the moment that people start thinking about being a woman is more of a disadvantage, which it can be, right? I'm not saying that, because I'm very lucky. I'm in a very different, I have a lot of privilege growing up, for example, studying in the UK, right? And going back. So what I do with specifically my female teams members, is that I would talk the same to them. Like I said, like, if you want this, you can manage it. Like a lot of women team member come to me and say like, I plan to have a baby, so I'm not going to join this leadership program because that's going to hurt the team, right? And I refuse to let them think that, and I ask them to stay. And this is real story. I've done that with a few female member, and now they're doing really well. So yeah, so I think that start with the mindset that
Thank you.
You gotta have to put in the work, basically.
Yes. Yeah, mindset with the first thing for you to think like enabling the gender equality in your organization. And how about you, Scott?
I think because of the history, and values of the British Council, we focused on the broader theme of inclusion for many, many years before it was popular, and I think we're really good at it. And we've been good around hiring, developing, mentoring, celebrating, promoting women through time. And I think women tend to do very well in the British Council. We do, however, I think still suffer like almost everyone else at the most senior level. And probably, I hope some of that is a matter of timing, and in 5 years that issue will be gone. But there's clearly things in the system which we haven't fully worked out from history as well. And I think what we need to do, though, is just keep the light focused on that, keep making sure that all the opportunities are equally shared and our processes support all that. But I also agree with many of the things Yen said as well. You don't want to differentiate too much, and in the end, everyone I think needs to really buckle down and work hard and be encouraged to go after the opportunities that are available.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Yes, and especially when you mentioned about like try not to differentiate and try to give the equal opportunity for others. And I would like to learn about the higher education context. For example, in Vietnam, we still have a very low level of women participation in the leadership roles in higher education that tend to be the area where women can flow. So how about you, Adam? You can comment on the higher education sector specifically?
So I'll say two things. I mean, it's worth saying that at SOAS, for instance, at the executive level, we are about 50-50 women and men leadership. There is no doubt, as Scott suggested, that overall macro statistics suggest that we are about 50-50 in the organization. But as you go higher up towards professorial status, etc., then male dominance becomes quite evident. And it's something that has been changing. It's been changing fast, but it's not where it needs to be. And it's something that we need to be continuously working on. And that's not only on the question of gender, it is also on the question of race and ethnicity. We are probably the only institution in the US that would have closely approximate the London demographics of at least 48-50% people of color in the UK. I will say one lesson that I've learned, both at Brits, where we dedicated to this, and at SOAS. Intentional leadership is absolutely central. You have to take it seriously. You have to want to change the organization, and you have to take leadership off the agenda of inclusion at the apex of the organization. You need to be pragmatic. You need to figure out what are the problems that are stopping people and then assisting them to overcome those hurdles. So intentional action is the central element, if there's a lesson to be learned about enabling conclusion, is intentional action. You must be conscious of it, you must want to change, and you must then figure out a plan and an agenda to change. And that has to happen at the leadership level.
Thank you, Adam. Yes, and at the leaders' positions, if you really want to change, you have the power to make the change. And my question is relating to the gender equality in organization, and also we talk about green agendas and the technology. And my next question is really relating to what all of the organization are now talking about, the sustainable development. So my question is how to balance between the business outcomes and sustainable development objective, which is sometimes is costly. So who would like to go first?
I can
Adam.
make a comment there. I think it's been a long time since organizations or businesses just prioritized profit over a broader set of goals. And I think that was a different era. Most organizations now or think about the world in a much more balanced way. I think there's a really important distinction when we're thinking about this, because there's a set of things that are values of the organization. Those might be inclusion, they might be alignment to sustainable development goals, they might be related to climate specifically. And these are things that as an organization, you say, we believe in, and we will make sure we bake into the plans and the way we run the organization. There's a set of different things that are politics that tend to be causes through time. And I think it's also important to recognize, as the leader of an organization, you look out and you'll have an organization that probably reflects society in some way anyhow. So you'll have groups of people who have certain causes, groups of people who have the opposite causes. And as a leader, you need to make sure you don't jump on each sort of group of causes that people have. And so I think it's important for the senior team to make that distinction. And then the things that are your values, as Adam said, you come up with intentional plans to make sure that they're part of what you do. And the things that are politics, you figure out how you're going to manage in your organization, which become trickier through time.
Thank you, Scott. And Adam?
When I was a younger person, my father used to always talk about balance in life. And if there's any lesson that I've learned after 20 years as an executive, is getting the balance right. So every organization has some fundamental purpose. In higher education, that's the delivery of an inclusive higher education, enabling access to the universities and providing quality, socially conscious graduates that have social justice agendas. But to do that and balance that with financial sustainability, I've seen organization have the best social justice agendas, the most inclusive agendas. But because they were not watching the finances, they completely implode the organization. And no social justice then takes place when the organization collapses. And so getting the balance right between financial sustainability and educational inclusion and quality and excellent education and social justice has to be the single lesson, it seems to me, the single focus of any CEO and executive team. Never take away your eyes from the financial sustainability dynamic of an organization. You don't get that balance right, you lose the organization, and then nothing happens. And that, it seems to me, is the central lesson that one needs to learn about, is the balance that needs to be achieved between multiple objectives in an organization.
Thank you, Adam. And Ian, how is that balance is being implemented at your organization?
Yeah, Adam, that was a very good point. That's an amazing point that normally people don't remember. I think for technology, it's a bit tricky, right? Because normally it's a very young company with a very short runway normally. So we don't have a lot of room to even think about too far in the future, except the giants like Google or Amazon. So to force people to think about the other side of the coin, right, is a bit tricky. But like I mentioned, like I shared at the beginning, right, the real reason why I want to do tech platform is because I think at the scale of a few millions people, right, if you do amend a few things, you can certainly influence people behavior in a positive manner. So for example, right, today we have about 100,000 drivers on the road. So if I can convert about 30% of that into a green vehicle, electric vehicles, right, with a cheaper cost, which actually make the income of the drivers increase, then obviously we would indirectly enable a lot of people to save, to help the environment relatively compared to the same vehicle using combustion engine, right? So this is the kind of execution of vision that I want to do, because I want the actual action of sustainability or all of this consciousness activities to be embedded within the business model, and it's not easy for sure, and it might take a very long time to form this kind of partnership or business model in a way that it's like Adam said, right, financial sustainable. But this is the whole reason why I want to do platforms at this scale.
Yep.
So again,
Thank you.
it's embedded business model. Yeah.
And thank you. I just heard an exciting news about your deal with Bean Group on the green technology for your company. So it's also a way to address the sustainable development goals in terms of the transferables energy. And my next question is more on like allowing you to look back at your younger times and having good sharing to all of the inspiring CEO out there really are now participating in this conversation. So as most of you are now, like Yen, still very young, you still have a long way to go, but I think that you are already at the pinnacle of your career. So what 3 things would you say to your younger self? So Scott, starting with you.
So this is sort of advice for the people listening to the call. I think it's very traditional, but so one thing I think that often gets overlooked these days is just how hard you have to work to be successful. So my main bit of advice always is to recognize that and accept the fact that you're going to have to work really hard if you want to accomplish a lot in life. The second thing is, I think, focus on being good at what you do and actually making an impact in what you do rather than political maneuvering around to get different roles or to be promoted through time. I think most of the people I've seen do that fail. Everyone else notices what you're doing and notices where your mental energy is put, and it's not a very appealing look. And the third thing is, do something, find something that you enjoy, that really inspires you and makes you excited in life, because this is the thing others will notice. If you're actually doing a good job and people think you love it, that's an appealing look. And those are the kind of people I think people will pick out to be leaders and train as leaders and give them opportunities. So those are the 3 things. And I apologize, they're so simple.
Simple, easy to understand as well. And I think that's easy for us to implement. Now I also had to learn. So now, Adam, what are your 3 things?
So one of which is related to what Scott said is, I think, in a slightly different way. Firstly, be passionate about what you do. Love what you want to do and be committed to the agenda. And I think you have to do that, because you're never going to work hard unless you are passionate about what you want to do. The second is, you're never going to deliver it on your own. Be aware that you're going to need a team, and you need to empower the team, and they need to be enthused by the agenda, and they need to drive that. And so you're only as good as your team, and you can lead through a team. And I think that that's the second. You're not going to do this on your own, especially in big organizations. And the third, be pragmatic. I mean, most people who are committed to social justice are so enthused by the cause that sometimes they just forget to be pragmatic. Forget that you need finances to survive, you need a salary to survive, to find out what is the most easiest, what is the problem, how to find a good solution to it, and adopt a pathway that is the least cost. And it seems to be, you can bring together passionate, a team building, a teamwork, and pragmatism. And if you can get those 3 stay working, you can move mountains in whatever field you're working.
Thank you, Adams, for the very 3 interesting sharings. And Yen, what are your 3 things?
This is what worked for me. So the first thing I would say that what helped me tremendously to get to today's journey is first, be brave. I always pick the opportunities that seem like a bad choice. People were like, "Are you crazy? Why did you pick that? Like, there's no chance you're gonna make it." So I think it doesn't matter what people think, right? There's a notion of what the good opportunity looks like. As long as you think you can make things happen, then that works for me across my 10 years in tech. I was quitting my investment bank job. I was quitting the financial market, and everybody was like, "You are crazy," and that kind of thing. So I think being brave, is really helps. The second thing is for me is making true friends, like the kind of friends that could, tell you that you messed up, the one that can, wake you up in a way. So finding true friends take a lot of work. Like you need to meet 100 normal person to maybe find someone who can potentially be your true friend, right? So have as many as you can. That could certainly help. I mean, I account that like 50 to 70% of my journey as of today. The last one would be to be kind. Not in the sense that things gonna go back and that kind of stuff, but I think what I find is being kind, meaning that the ability to help people in a very deep, manner, like not just being nice, but be able to help people in whatever topics like healthcare, finding a school place for their kid, finding a doctors for the family, that kind of stuff, and that actually what makes you being much better at the job, because you never know what's going to become handy in the job. So that's what I find really helpful. Yeah, that is what I would, or telling my younger friend.
Excellent list of the 9 advice. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think that this is the excellent list of the 9 people who want to be a leader, successful leader, can learn. It's about inspirational that you want to create. It's also a focus on things that you really want to do. But you also need to find time to enjoy the work that you do, the life that you are living, but you need to commit it to the work that you are now doing. Do it together with the teams and be balanced on the things that you do. And of course, Ian said that for young people, you need to be brave and you need to have someone next to you through the storm and through the good things, and be kind to other people. So before we have a list of the questions from audience, and I think that they also put a lot of feedback on your sharing. Is all excellent. So the question that I would like to raise on behalf of the audience is that, is it really true that it is lonely at the top? So being CEO is really lonely. So may I go with Adam first?
So not always, but there are difficult times when it can be very, very lonely. When the rubber hits the road, when you have to make a hard call, and every organization in the difficult environments that we operate in have to make hard calls. And when that hard call has to be made, it can be very lonely, because those choices can impact on the future of the organization. And the future of the organization impacts on the livelihoods of people, on the hard choice, and the impacts that it has, and in Jens' case, customers, in our case, students. And so it can be at moments, and you must be prepared and willing to take that.
Yep. How about you, Scott?
I would agree with that, although I think Yen partly answered the question earlier as well, and that you have to be careful as you become a more and more senior leader to make sure you are making good friends and being close to the people around you, which helps alleviate some of that. But like Adam said, very often you're called on to make a choice where you'll have lots of advisors around you, but they all have a vested interest. And it's not that they're bad people. That's just that's the way it is. And ultimately the decision falls on you, and you need to make it on your own with all the good advice you can. So yes, it can be lonely. It's one of the trade-offs you make, but you can also surround yourself with really good people to do a lot to alleviate that.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And Ian, would you like to add anything? Although that Scott said that you already mentioned about having a good friend through the storms and.
Yeah, I think just to add, right? Obviously, of course, it's lonely, right? Like, is it a mountain? There's less people at the top. And I think one of the thing is people at the top normally blame themselves for everything. Like, you always feel guilty for things go wrong, right? So I think while being more conscious about what to improve, I think it's also important to not blaming yourself all the time, to keep the stress level lower. So yeah, just to reconfirm.
Yes. So actually that we really want to ask you a question of like, what is your advice to the young CEO out there? But already the ninth point you raised is already a very good sharing to them own. So through the like 1 hour have passed very quick, and through your sharing I hear you are talking so much about the technology that have the great impact on the way that organization is doing, but we never forget about the people who are the key, the center to the work that we do. This also require you, the challenge that you are now facing, but also require you to have a intentional leadership that can look at the balancing of the challenge, the business outcome, and also the good thing that you are doing for the society. And that's always about the team work that help make your organization successful. So I think this really thought provoking for us all, even for myself, and learning from your sharing. So thank you so much for your sharing today. And I would like, on behalf of all the audience, to send a great thank you to the speaker for your honest sharing and also the insight that you have to take as a CEO, especially for us to look at your life as a CEO as well. So many things that you revealed today, and we know more about you. And I know that this life is both rewarding yet challenging. And the thought provoking that we take on today will help the others to think about their future development as well. So once again, let's join me to thank our speaker and have a good evening and morning, everyone. And now I would like to hand over to Andrew Chadwick, our global program lead, for closing. Thank you so much, Adam, Scott, and Ian.